these host countries and investing in sustainable solutions. These are the goals of the Global Compact. By strengthening migration policies, we shall guarantee a coherent global policy for people who are migrating, no matter the reason for their migration. Since the adoption of the Global Compact 7 years ago, over 3,400 pledges were made by states, by international organizations, civil societies, and private sector in order to curb the degradation of refugees' situation in the world. This progress is particularly in economic inclusion, in the insertion on the job market, but this progress is still not enough.
Nous continuons à agir sur 3 plans. Le premier, dans les pays d'accueil et de retour, nous maintenons notre engagement annuel de 300 millions de francs suisses en faveur du pacte mondial pour les réfugiés. Ces fonds sont destinés à l'aide humanitaire, à la reconstruction et à la coopération au développement. 2. En Suisse, notre approche intégrée associe les collectivités publiques et privées ainsi que les réfugiés eux-mêmes dans l'accueil, le soutien et la réinstallation à la facilitation des voies d'admission humanitaire. Et 3e point, enfin, c'est ici, dans la Genève internationale, que s'élaborent et se défendent les règles humanitaires. Les règles qui protègent celles et ceux qui en ont besoin. En collaboration avec le Haut Commissariat des réfugiés, le Conseil des droits de l'homme et le CICR, la Genève internationale est le pilier indispensable d'un multilatéralisme durable et efficace. Consciente de cet atout stratégique unique, la Suisse investit 270 millions de francs sur les 4 prochaines années en tant qu'État hôte afin de renforcer et promouvoir et renouveler la Genève internationale. Mesdames et messieurs, je souhaite remercier tous nos partenaires, publics comme privés, qui travaillent sans relâche pour les personnes déplacées de force. La Suisse est heureuse de les accompagner et de renforcer leur effort sur le terrain. Pour conclure, permettez-moi un message plus personnel Un message au haut commissaire Filippo Grandi. En Suisse, nous avons l'habitude de travailler en équipe et j'ai l'impression, cher Filippo, que nous avons, toi et moi, formé une très belle équipe. Et comme nous partageons la même langue maternelle, je vais conclure mon speech en italien. Caro Filippo, grazie per la tua leadership ispiratrice, il tuo impegno instancabile e la nostra collaborazione sincera apprezzata fin dalla prima ora. Desidero perciò lasciarti un ricordo che dovrebbe essere qui in giro. Ti prego di venire. E finisco. Ho riflettuto, signore e signori, a lungo a quale ricordo era possibile lasciare a Filippo Grandi dopo 10 anni alla testa di un'organizzazione così importante e all'interno di una collaborazione così aperta, sincera e preziosa. E avete visto che cosa ho lasciato? È una colomba dell'artista svizzero Hans Erni, in segno della nostra amicizia, una colomba come la colomba della pace, incarnazione, caro Filippo, del tuo impegno umanitario. Mi piace pensare che l'arte sia un veicolo di speranza e di coscienza collettiva di fronte alla sofferenza umana e sarò felice se potrai conservarla con te in ricordo di questa tua lunga e importante missione nella Ginevra internazionale che spero non si concluda del tutto. Vi chiedo di tutti insieme fare un grande applauso, un tonnerre d'applaudissements per Filippo Grandi. Ma come si dice in italiano, via un papa se ne fa un altro. Et donc, mesdames et messieurs, j'aimerais aussi exprimer mes meilleurs vœux également au haut commissaire proposé par le secrétaire général des Nations Unies, Antonio Guterres. Il s'agit de M. Barham Ahmed Salih, ancien président de la République d'Irak. Il devrait être élu par l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies. La probabilité est très forte que ceci soit rempli. Donc, soyez assurés que la Suisse reste pleinement à vos côtés, aux côtés de l'Haut Commissariat des réfugiés, avec aussi le nouveau Haut Commissaire. Merci infiniment pour votre attention et bon forum et bonne discussion sur les résultats de nos efforts.
Grazie tanto, caro Ignazio. Don't worry, it will not be the whole meeting in Italian. We'll just limit to this interaction. Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Conseiller fédéral, caro Ignazio, pour vos mots très importants et pour les engagements que vous avez pris une fois de plus au nom de la Suisse dans ce contexte du pacte mondial et du forum, et bien sûr pour les mots que vous avez bien voulu m'adresser personnellement et qui m'ont beaucoup touché, ainsi que le très beau cadeau. Merci, je le garderai certainement avec moi. Et je vais maintenant passer la parole à Madame Zakia Khoudadadi, qui va partager avec nous ses remarques. Vous avez la parole. Je pense que vous allez au podium.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Je suis très fière d'être ici aujourd'hui avec vous, représentants d'États, d'organisations internationales et de normes gouvernementales, de villes, de comités, de tout le monde. Je suis très contente d'être ici. Je m'appelle Zakia Khoudadadi, je suis née à Herat en Afghanistan. Et je suis grandie avec une bras trophée en tant qu'une personne en situation de handicap. Et malheureusement, dans mon pays, il y a beaucoup de difficultés pour les femmes et pour les filles. Et en plus, pour les femmes en situation de handicap, la vie, c'est vraiment très compliqué. Mais quand même, j'ai découvert le taekwondo en Afghanistan avec mon entraîneur. C'est une personne aussi en situation de handicap, mais c'est une monsieur qui m'a appris le taekwondo tout d'abord et après para-taekwondo, parce qu'en Afghanistan, il n'y a pas de comité paralympique et il n'y a pas de sport para en fait. Mais grâce à lui, j'ai découvert taekwondo en Afghanistan, en Herat. Et des années plus tard, j'ai remporté belle médaille aux Jeux paralympiques de Paris. Je suis première athlète réfugiée qui gagnait belle médaille historique en 2024 pour les réfugiés monde entier. Et ça, c'est pour moi, c'est très grande fierté. Et aujourd'hui, je suis franco-afghane. Depuis 3 jours que je suis officiellement française. Et ça aussi, pour moi, c'était grande fierté pour participer au Los Angeles pour la France. J'ai été participer aux Paralympiques de Tokyo pour l'Afghanistan. C'est juste après la prise au pouvoir les talibans, le 15 août 2021. J'ai quitté mon pays avec une seule passeport pour participer aux Jeux paralympiques Tokyo pour la première fois. Et après Tokyo, j'ai choisi la France pour les vivre et pour continuer mon espoir et pour poursuivre mon rêve. Et mon rêve, c'était médaille aux Jeux paralympiques de Paris. Après Paris, aujourd'hui, je suis française, bien évidemment. J'ai continué mon espoir en tant que femme afghane, en tant que réfugiée et en tant que Français aussi. Et c'était une poids lourd pour moi, mais c'était grande fierté aussi. Et c'est vraiment mon message aujourd'hui ici avec vous. C'est un appel au courage aux gens dans les moments compliqués, dans un moment contexte pour les réfugiés, pour les femmes afghanes. Et en 2026, mon souhait est que l'espoir et l'éducation offriront encore plus de chaque aux réfugiés, aux se relever de rebâtir leur vie. Le sport m'a appris à ne jamais abandonner. Même dans les moments de désespoir, j'ai grandi dans un pays qui les femmes aucun d'autre droit. Et pour faire des sports ici, aujourd'hui, les sports aussi, c'était interdit en Afghanistan. Et ça fait plus de 150 jours que les filles afghanes ne peuvent plus aller à l'école. Et ça, c'est vraiment horrible. Et c'est vraiment très douloureux pour nous en tant que femmes afghanes aussi. Parce que c'est depuis 4 ans et demi que les femmes afghanes étaient complètement dans une prison en Afghanistan. Et il faut répéter ça, et pour moi aussi. Et l'éducation donne le outil pour avancer vers un avenir plus juste avec des opportunités. Tout devient possible. Je vous dirai à toutes les femmes en Afghanistan et ailleurs et les réfugiés du monde entier. Et l'espoir est vivant. Vous n'êtes pas seuls. L'espoir, c'est une langue universelle de la paix, de liberté et de dignité. Mon message, c'est un appel au courage. Continuez à vous rêver, à vous battre pour votre droit et pour croire et un avenir meilleur. Je suis engagée dans les sports et dans la paix parce que je crois profondément au pouvoir du sport pour transformer la vie et moi-même sur mon nombre de filles. Je veux être une voix pour ceux qui luttent pour la liberté et pour l'égalité. Le sport m'a donné une force intérieure et confiance, plateforme pour promouvoir la paix et l'égalité. En 2024, j'ai remporté la médaille de bronze des Jeux paralympiques de Paris. C'est une équipe symbolique, symbole de résilience, de la paix et de liberté et de force. J'ai également besoin de vous, de votre aide pour mettre la pression sur les talibans et d'autres régimes, pour que toutes les femmes afghanes libres d'étudier et faire du sport. Mon rêve était simple, qu'un jour chaque fille afghane puisse courir librement, pas pour fuir la peur, mais pour atteindre son avenir. Merci à tous.
Je remercie Zakia pour ses mots qu'elle a bien voulu partager avec nous. Lui répéter combien c'est important pour nous tous de l'écouter. Elle porte beaucoup de symboles. Le symbole de l'exil de son pays, qui a été un dossier central dans l'histoire du HCR et dans mon histoire personnelle pendant très longtemps. Le dossier de la participation sportive des athlètes réfugiés aux Jeux olympiques et aux Jeux paralympiques. J'étais à Paris au moment de la compétition quand Zakia a gagné la médaille de bronze. C'était une émotion incroyable, je peux vous assurer. Et merci à la France pour avoir donné un nouveau pays et un futur à Zakia et à d'autres également. Merci beaucoup. I would like now to invite you to view a short film that carries an important message from our co-convening countries. It's called Refugees, You're Not Alone, Host Communities, You're Not Alone. Please.
We cannot turn our backs on refugees. Our global community cannot thrive if its most vulnerable are left behind.
Every minute, someone is forced to flee their home.
Nadie se quiere ir de la tierra que lo vio nacer. Nadie quiere salir huyendo de su casa. La gente se va porque quiere salvaguardar la vida o quiere mejores oportunidades.
But when people find safety, something powerful happens. Neighbors open up their doors, teachers open up new possibilities, communities share, and friendships form.
Uganda has become a shining example of what is possible when we prioritize humanity over fear, compassion over division, and solidarity over indifference.
Asylum is not defined by fear. It is defined by hope. It is a promise that any person fleeing war and violence will find safety, dignity, and a chance to rebuild.
I believe that we must all envision a future where each and every refugee and displaced person can talk about their dreams and have opportunities to work hard to make their dreams come true.
At the Global Refugee Forum, the world pledged support, and the governments, the private sector, partners, and refugees themselves have been working together to deliver. And although funding gaps are holding back progress, every success story matters. Every step counts.
Nous devons nous engager à faire plus, à faire ce qu'il faut tout simplement, pour aider celles et ceux qui fuient la guerre et les persécutions à retrouver une vie digne, en paix, en sécurité, en liberté, et quand les conditions le permettent, à revenir.
Safety is just the beginning.
Les perspectives sont inquiétantes. Notre appel est urgent. Plus que jamais, nous devons faire preuve d'une grande ambition. Nous avons l'espoir que l'esprit de coopération triomphera.
Together, we can rise to the challenge.
Thank you very much, and special thanks to Grace Dorong, a former refugee from South Sudan who provided her voice to this film. With your permission, Zakia Federal Councillor, I would now like to offer my own personal reflection. Consigliere federale, carissimo Ignazio, cher Zakia, distinguished delegates, colleagues and friends. On the 15th of December of 2023, exactly 2 years ago, the second Global Refugee Forum came to its conclusion. It certainly felt like a different time. And yet, in thinking ahead to the next Global Refugee Forum in 2027, in my closing remarks, I caution that, and I quote, "Let's not have any illusions. The road there will not be smooth. There will be interruptions and obstacles, and we will have setbacks caused by storms of all kinds," unquote. I believe I speak for all of us when I say I wish I had been wrong. But this past year has been defined by one storm after another. Altogether, a perfect storm, really. Witness the unending atrocities committed in Sudan, in Ukraine, in Gaza, and in Myanmar. In the past few days alone, we have seen yet another kindergarten, yet another apartment building, yet another hospital bombed, killing dozens and displacing thousands more, adding to the millions already forced to flee senseless violence in search of safety. In a global context in which hate is allowed to increasingly spread racist divisions, as yesterday's appalling massacre against the Jewish community in Sydney sadly proves. A year when refugees were frequently vilified, scapegoated in so many places, with their suffering cynically used by traffickers for profit, and their situation by politicians to gain votes for the next election. A year of repeated attacks on the 1951 Refugee Convention and on the very institution of asylum. And of course, a year when the sudden, drastic, irresponsible and short-sighted collapse of foreign assistance continues to devastate the aid sector, inflicting so much unnecessary pain in its wake, on refugees, of course, but also on all of you, working to bring whatever relief you still can. Today, however, I don't want to dwell on these challenges. Indeed, the road to protection is long, narrow, and difficult. There will inevitably be more setbacks along the way. We have always known that, just as we have always known that compassion and solidarity would be dismissed and derided. We cannot let that discourage us, and we simply will not be discouraged. Instead, we must always remember that, as Zakia so gracefully described, on behalf of millions of refugees, solidarity saves lives. La solidarité sauve des vies. Merci Zakia pour avoir partagé avec nous ces mots si importants, si nécessaires aujourd'hui. Par votre exemple, vous nous rappelez, malgré un discours global de plus en plus intolérant, qu'il ne faut jamais renoncer, que les personnes réfugiées enrichissent nos sociétés et nos communautés, comme vous-même l'avez démontré de manière si inspirée par vos actes et par vos propos. C'est donc nous qui vous remercions. Dear friends, this determination must remain our North Star. And as we navigate these and future turbulent times together, the Global Compact on Refugees is the map that will continue to guide us on a journey that, let us not forget, began almost 10 years ago, in 2016, with the adoption by the General Assembly of the New York Declaration on Refugees and Migrants. We have come a long way. It is important to remember that. I know that the temptation is to always focus on the day's problems. Indeed, there are real emergencies that must be addressed, real obstacles to overcome, and sometimes we are tempted to despair. But if we are to stay the course, if we are to remain on track, we must also learn to lift our gaze. To understand where we're going, we need to remember where we came from. And so my main message today, as we open this progress review of the Global Refugee Forum, is that we have already accomplished much. We should not shy away from that. On the contrary, now is the time to build on it. The last decade, including the last 2 years since the Second Global Refugee Forum, have been about much more than setbacks. Thanks to our collective efforts, the framework that we have patiently created and developed together over 10 years, surely not perfect, has nevertheless delivered. Through the Global Refugee Forum, the pledges, the commitments, all the different facets of our work, we have made a real difference in the lives of refugees and of the communities hosting them. Just look at the numbers. Since the last forum in 2023, close to 3,500 individual pledges and 47 multi-stakeholder pledges were made, with more than $2.6 billion already disbursed through fulfilled financial pledges, many of them matching the pledges of host countries to adopt more inclusive policies. We have made huge strides in bringing development funding more quickly and effectively into refugee responses. According to OECD data, roughly $4 billion are invested annually by development actors in forced displacement situation. And this is new. It didn't exist 10 years ago. These efforts have driven advances in education, in employment, in refugee protection, in climate action, in improving access and quality of services for refugees and their hosts. The future of responses to forced displacement lies in strengthening the capacity of national systems to include refugees, not in setting up parallel systems. This will not only ensure that responses are more sustainable, it will also mitigate the impact of future financial shocks by reducing dependency on foreign aid. It will be critical to continue forging new and innovative partnerships with a wide range of stakeholders: the private sector, refugee-led organizations, international financial institutions, climate-related funds, academia, civil society, sports organizations, and of course, refugees themselves, each contributing their talent, expertise, and determination in the search for solutions. We would not have made such progress had it not been for the Compact and its pledging framework. As I always say, the Refugee Compact, to be seen as complementary to the one on safe and orderly migration, is a toolbox that proposes to states and other partners solutions on how to implement the principles of the 1951 Convention and other legal instruments in the complex world of today. And beyond frameworks and structures, it is the underlying vision of cooperation and responsibility sharing that we must absolutely preserve and nurture. The belief that by working together, solutions to forced displacement are possible. There are many examples, some offered by the co-convening countries. Uganda frequently and rightly reminds us that it is not possible to earmark refugees when thousands cross your border every day. I would go further, with your permission, Permanent Secretary, and say that Uganda has shown year after year what it means to believe in the potential of refugees, not only through words, but especially through its commitment to their self-reliance and dignity. And this despite hosting nearly 2 million refugees. The same commitment and courage informed the groundbreaking decision by Colombia to approve temporary protection status for displaced Venezuelans in 2021, benefiting close to 2 million Venezuelan refugees and migrants, a real high point of my tenure as High Commissioner and an example that I often return to. Remember, at the time, the world was still in the throes of a global pandemic that had affected everybody. And yet, then President Duque understood that giving Venezuelans, refugees and migrants access to residency, jobs and services would benefit both Venezuelans and their Colombian hosts. And he was right. That is the power of inclusion. Many other countries have shown similar leadership and moved towards greater inclusion of displaced people into their societies and economies. This year alone, Kenya, Ethiopia, Rwanda, Brazil, and many others have all presented roadmaps or adopted policies that aim to both enhance refugee self-reliance and bring dividends to host communities. Kenya's Shirika plan is a particularly striking example that shows how, after years of difficult debate around the presence of refugees in the country, it is possible to shed the divisions of the past and move towards greater unity. But and this is a critical point which I have made countless times, these efforts cannot succeed on their own. Hosting refugees has a cost, one that countries such as Chad, Iran, Costa Rica, Egypt, and many others cannot bear alone. They must be supported, especially financially. Otherwise, there is a risk that protection gains for refugees will be eroded. And that, as the recently issued GCR indication report shows, progress will be undone, or rather be further undone, I should say, considering the impact that recent funding cuts have already had. I returned last week from a visit to Sudan, my last UNHCR mission, to a country very dear to me, as it is where I started working for UNHCR in 1988. It was a sobering reality check. The scale of the destruction I saw and the depth of the trauma inflicted on the Sudanese people are devastating. It was hard to hear displaced Sudanese women in Adaba describe the sexual violence they had escaped. It is harder still to explain that UNHCR and its partners cannot provide all the help they need because of lack of funds. What a shameful indictment of the state of the international solidarity. And so I must appeal to your generosity once more on behalf of these women, on behalf of all refugees, displaced, and stateless people, and on behalf of the communities that host them, especially in situations that remain at the margins of global attention. I must appeal again both for more funding and more quality funding, meaning flexible, unearmarked funding that can be used to respond where needs are greatest. And I must appeal for the disbursement of pledge funds as early as possible in 2026 to avoid any disruptions in the provision of life-saving assistance or indeed in the provision of life-changing assistance. And here I'm thinking in particular of our work in the context of solutions, another key objective of the Global Compact on Refugees, as you know. It is impossible to speak of solutions to forced displacement today without immediately thinking of the situation in Syria, given the momentous changes of the last 12 months, which have enabled the large-scale voluntary returns of over 3 million Syrians, including 1.2 million refugees. Syria is a country at an important crossroads. It is also a country, as I'm sure we will hear on Wednesday in the context of the dedicated side event, that needs immense investment to rebuild, provide jobs, create access to basic services, and of course, guarantee security so that the return of refugees and displaced people can be sustainable. This is where our collective support and your pledges can make a significant difference. This is where humanitarian relief, long-term development, peace, and human rights intersect. Dear friends, there are so many other important aspects of our work that I have not mentioned. The innovative route-based protection approach that we have promoted jointly with the International Organization for Migration, the European Commission, and others to respond to the mixed movement of refugees and migrants, to name an obvious example, or the enormous progress made in addressing statelessness since the launch of the Global Alliance to End Statelessness just over a year ago. But let me not preempt the discussion, as that is exactly why we're here, to review the progress made in meeting our commitments, identify gaps that remain or those that have appeared, and to map out the road ahead. A road that I will continue to travel, but as of next 1st of January, no longer as High Commissioner for Refugees, but as a citizen, as a supporter, but with the same belief in the power of working together. A new High Commissioner for Refugees, we've heard this from the Federal Counselor, whose selection, as you surely know, is about to be finalized, will succeed me very soon. Since the process has not yet formally concluded, let me simply say for now that I have full trust in the judgment of the Secretary General, a previous High Commissioner for Refugees himself, and of course in the decision by the General Assembly. Meanwhile, we do not stop. We have important work to do in the next 3 days. So for now, let me welcome all of you once again, along with our Swiss hosts, whose generous support made this event possible. And thank you once again, dear Ignazio, for your kind words, your constant support, your personal friendship, and of course, for the beautiful gift. Let me close by mentioning one final highlight of the last decade, certainly for me personally. In June 2022, I spent World Refugee Day in Côte d'Ivoire to witness the return of Ivorian refugees to their country, for some after 20 years of exile. During my visit, I went to the border with Liberia, where soon-to-be returnees cross the Sestos River on a small boat, many of them setting foot in their home country for the first time. I joined one of the last groups of returnees to cross that river. When the time came to disembark in Côte d'Ivoire, I vividly remember holding the hand of a little Ivorian girl. She could not have been older than 6 or 7 years and wore an oversized, bright orange life vest. I have often thought of that little girl, wondering if I was holding her hand or if in fact she was holding mine. And so I want to especially acknowledge today the more than 300 participants who have been or are themselves refugees, displaced, or stateless people, and who will be part of this progress review. I want to thank you very specially for being part of this process and for helping us move forward. We cannot succeed without you. And now, let's get to work. Thank you. Sorry, let me transition to my chair role. It is now my honor to welcome to the podium Mr. Aggrey David Kibenge, Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Gender, Labor and Social Development of Uganda, who will deliver a statement on behalf of the co-hosts and co-conveners of the 2023 Global Refugee Forum. Permanent Secretary, you have the floor.
Distinguished delegates, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to deliver this statement on behalf of the Global Refugee Forum 2023 co-hosts and co-conveners, namely Colombia, Japan, Jordan, France, Switzerland, Uganda, and UNHCR. We extend our warmest welcome to all states and stakeholders gathered today. Your presence affirms a shared conviction that the international community remain united in support for the refugees, as well as the countries and communities that host them. Since assuming our collective role in late 2022, we remain encouraged by the clear and measurable progress achieved. Cumulatively, thousands of new high-quality pledges registered and implemented, in addition to 47 multi-stakeholder pledges that came together to enhance coordination and unlock the power of joint action. Development financing and private sector engagement expanded. Large-scale improvements in many countries regarding inclusion policies across various key sectors. And most importantly, meaningful refugee participation became a lived experience with refugees shaping policies and pledges. Taken together, these achievements reflect the strength of multilateralism when it is both fit for purpose and fit for results. At the same time, 2025 was one of the most challenging years, characterized by continued forcible displacement, ongoing conflicts, and one of the worst financial crises witnessed by the humanitarian sector in decades, if not ever. We all recognize the negative consequences of the funding crisis, but it is becoming evident that they are far more severe than initially anticipated. All the while, host countries continue to open their hearts and homes, often without the resources or infrastructure to do so. While important strides have been made in making the burden and responsibility sharing more equitable, much more needs to be done. Inclusive national systems continue to struggle to properly host newly arrived populations. Host countries that show extraordinary generosity face overwhelming strain. Ambitious policy pledges remain under-resourced. Opportunities to expand self-reliance are delayed or lost. Progress made in education, protection systems, and gender equality risks being rolled back, with negative consequences on the burden of host countries. Retaining investments in inclusion leads to higher costs to fund humanitarian needs, not an efficient way of making use of scarce resources, even less so in the current funding crisis. While we recognize the significant support provided by donor states, development actors, international financial institutions, and the private sector, we are far from meeting the scale of present needs. On the contrary, now more than ever, investments for inclusion are required that reflect area-based needs and opportunities. Pledge matching, therefore, needs to happen on the ground, with substantial involvement from both hosts and refugee communities. It should then be reflected at international level, bottom up. Knowledge sharing should be promoted across regions because implementation is uneven, with constrained progress in areas such as return and reintegration. A particular attention should be given to overcoming persistent regulatory barriers to inclusion within the concerned countries. Experience so far has shown that a top-down approach remains insufficiently realized in practice and does not lead to satisfactory results. Furthermore, the 2025 GCR indicator report, issued just last month, reinforces the call for solidarity, showing that countries with only 27% of global wealth host 80% of the world's refugees, while ODA for refugee situations has begun to fall sharply. Despite improvements across all 16 GCR indicators, progress on self-reliance, return, and responsibility sharing risks being reversed without sustained international support. Against this backdrop, it is important to recognize that there are also encouraging developments. Wider inclusion in national data and health systems, rising refugee enrollments in higher education, and bold steps by states to transition camps, expand digital connectivity, and integrate refugees into climate planning and finance. This progress illustrates how real transformation becomes possible when political will, resources, and partnership aligns on the ground, supported by international initiatives. And while solutions to conflicts continue to be elusive, we reiterate the imperative to invest in recovery, resilience, and the enabling conditions that make voluntary, safe, dignified, and sustainable return possible. Encouraging progress in several countries of origin already shows that such return can become a genuine and lasting solution, and we remain committed to seeing this strengthened further as we look toward the next Global Refugee Forum. As we begin the GRF Progress Review, we urge all delegations to approach this meeting not as a routine stocktake, but as a moment to reaffirm our commitment to concrete collective action through the GCR and the GRF to identify new initiatives and partners with whom to work on making them come through. The pledges already made must be fully implemented. Their impact must be maximized. The gaps identified must guide planning, preparation, and mobilization towards the third Global Refugee Forum in 2027. We thank all delegations present today, and let us ensure that the promise of the Global Compact on Refugees continues to translate into meaningful and tangible change in the lives of millions of refugees and in the communities that continue to host them with such generosity. I thank you for your kind attention.
Thank you very much, Permanent Secretary, for speaking on behalf of the co-hosting and co-convening countries. We will have now a session in which we will hear from various stakeholders, and the title of the session is Guiding Refugee Responses in a Changing World. We have 6 speakers. If I may ask each one of them to try to respect the 5 minutes limit, because we are running a little bit late, but we'll catch up if you are good timekeepers. So without further ado, let me call on the first speaker of this session, delivering the Global Refugee Statement, Ms. Noor Jarrouj, part of the UNHCR Advisory Board. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Grandi. Excellencies, colleagues, and fellow refugees. Around the world, families are running out of places to go. The scale of global displacement remains extremely high, with 117.3 million people forced to flee. Not because they chose to move, but because staying meant persecution, violence, or the collapse of their basic rights and safety. Behind every statistic is a person who once had a home, a community, and a future rooted in the ordinary rhythms of life. This reality reminds us that the systems designed to protect people in times of crisis are under severe strain. Forcibly displaced and stateless people are navigating overlapping emergencies. Conflict that show no sign of resolution, peace processes that stall, and protracted crises that hold entire generations in limbo. Host countries, most of them low and middle income states, continue to show remarkable generosity, even as global support remains uneven and unpredictable. 10 countries alone hosted more than half of the world's refugees in 2024. These pressures demand a renewed commitment to the principles that underpin international protection. Yet, throughout these challenges, refugees continue to rebuild their lives, contribute to economies, strengthen communities, and care for one another. But resilience alone cannot be the foundation of international policy. Refugees are not bystanders. We are actors, leaders, organizers, and experts in our own right. Across the world, refugee-led organizations are delivering solutions every day, from Cox's Bazar to Lebanon to Colombia to Kenya and Nigeria. They respond first and stay longest. They also bring technical expertise grounded in lived experience to policy-making spaces. Refugees across generations, genders, and identities are leading responses within their communities, but their leadership remains under-recognized and underfunded. Consultation without decision-making power is not meaningful participation. Tokenism wastes our expertise. Excluding refugees from policy design undermines the effectiveness of the entire system. Localization efforts must shift power rather than responsibility, prioritizing quality funding for organizations led by displaced and stateless persons, and ensuring that international organizations complement rather than overshadow this leadership. If we want better and more effective outcomes, refugees must be partners, not afterthoughts. Inclusion must also reflect the diversity of refugee experiences. Women and girls face heightened risks of violence and exclusion. LGBTQI+ refugees confront discrimination and insecurity. Refugees with disabilities struggle to access services and information. Youth face barriers that limit their leadership and economic opportunities. The youngest refugees' children still lack access to vital early childhood services like early learning and child protection, which minimizes their long life development. Economic inclusion and the right to work, especially for women, young people, and caregivers, must be part of any credible protection system. Policies that ignore these realities deepen inequality. Protection must respond to the needs of all refugees, not only for the ones that are most visible or easy to access. The global funding crisis is magnifying these inequalities as essential services shrink. Therefore, including forcibly displaced people in resource allocation decisions ensures that they align with the needs and priorities of affected communities. Durable solutions also remain central to any credible refugee response, but for many, they remain more theoretical than real. Voluntary return is possible only when conditions allow for safety and dignity. Local integration requires consistent policies and long-term support for both refugees and host communities. Resettlement, that once was a powerful expression of global solidarity, remains far below global needs. In the first half of 2025, only 28,700 refugees were able to access resettlement or sponsorship pathways across 18 different countries, almost 3 times fewer than in the same period in 2024. Expanding safe pathways, strengthening conditions for sustainable return, and enabling genuine inclusion in countries of asylum must be approached with realism, rights, and refugee agency at the center. Climate change is compounding displacement, intensifying fragility, and placing additional pressures on communities already living through crisis. Strengthening the HDP nexus, linking humanitarian, development, and peace-building efforts, and supporting frontline states ensure responses are more inclusive, sustainable, and shaped by the needs of the most affected. At the heart of our collective responsibility lies the protection regime itself. The right to seek asylum is under growing pressure, and deterrence-based approaches continue to spread. These practices do not reduce displacement, they increase our suffering and weaken the global framework that has safeguarded millions. Upholding the 1951 Refugee Convention and the principle of non-refoulement must remain a non-negotiable. A credible protection system requires fair asylum procedures, access to rights, and humane reception conditions. Millions of refugees and stateless people still lack documentation and legal identity, without which rights, safety, and solutions remain out of reach. This Global Refugee Forum Progress Review also marks the final global gathering under the leadership of High Commissioner Filippo Grandi. Over the past decade, his tenure has helped elevate meaningful refugee participation within global discussions. This progress must not only be preserved, but deepened, ensuring more spaces to influence policy and programming are accessible to refugee experts and recognizing them as key contributors for more effective solutions. The next High Commissioner must defend the Refugee Convention unequivocally, confront policies that erode protection norms, and champion meaningful refugee participation at all levels of UNHCR's governance and at regional and country policy levels. They must work with the states to uphold international law, resist externalization practices, and ensure that protection is never treated as negotiable. The world has made us many promises. What is needed now is measurable action, sustained investment, and political courage. Refugees do not seek affirmation. We seek follow-through, transparency, and accountability. What we ask is simple. Match our courage with action, our expertise with partnership, and our commitment with accountability. The future of international protection depends on what the world chooses now. Retreat or responsibility, symbolism or substance, managed decline or collective renewal, the system must choose justice now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Noor Jarrouj. It is now my pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Naoki Ando, Senior Vice President of the Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, speaking on behalf of development partners. Mr. Ando, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, representatives of forced displaced people, colleagues, friends. It is my great honor to address this important forum on behalf of Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, and on behalf of development partners. In 2003, 22 years ago, Madame Sadako Ogata, the former UN High Commissioner for Refugees, became the president of JICA. She led the humanitarian organization and then a development agency, which have different missions, functions, structures, and even different cultures. JICA, before 2003, was focusing on long-term social and economic development, such as infrastructure, human resource development, and natural environment conservation. Traditionally, we were not extensively involved in refugee assistance. Madame Sadako Ogata served as the president of JICA for 8.5 years, and she successfully introduced the concept of human security to JICA operation and integrated humanitarian response and long-term development. Even after the retirement of Madame Ogata, JICA has been taking an HDP nexus approach in refugee-affected areas. We have learned a lot from field operations that development factors such as ownership and capacity development are very, very effective in humanitarian operations too. At the second GRF, JICA announced 12 multi-stakeholder pledges, and we are making progress in around 20 countries worldwide. I'd like to take this opportunity to share two key points based on our experiences in the field of refugee-affected areas. First, we must respect the national policies, plans, and priorities of the host governments, and we must support efforts to strengthen the capacity of both government and communities. This is especially important when refugees remain in host community for long and there is a need for sustainable service delivery for peaceful coexistence. In northwestern part of Uganda, JICA supported the local government to collect data on needs and impacts of refugees and host communities with a participatory method. The government incorporated those data into national and district development plans. As a result, both central and local governments can prioritize social services delivery for host communities as well as refugees. The plan owned by the host government, host communities, and refugees is now respected and supported by many donors. Second point, we must strengthen our support for voluntary and sustainable return to countries of origin by addressing the root causes of displacement and creating an environment where people can have a decent life in their communities. Development operations in the area of origin are indispensable of this process. Let me share some examples. JICA has been supporting Colombian government to build capacity to take mine actions to ensure the safe return of IDPs. Safe land is a fundamental condition for agriculture and daily life. We also work with national institutions and for sustainable return for strengthening livelihood and fostering social cohesion in communities. In other countries, rehabilitation of basic infrastructure like clinics and schools, job creation including agricultural development, DDR by vocational training institutions, security improvement by trusted community police, and so on, are supported. The current historically huge number of forced displacements will definitely require increasing support for reconstruction of community in area of return. We have to be prepared for this agenda. For peaceful coexistence in host community or promotion of sustainable return, we should cooperate with each other under the flag of HDP Nexus. This year, we have been alarmed by the decline of our attention and support on the free refugee crisis worldwide, and unfortunately, Japan is no exception. Let us show our unchanged solidarity. We need to expand our partnership with private sectors and civil societies. We also need mutual learning process from experienced countries such as Uganda, Zambia, Mauritania, Colombia, and so on in peaceful coexistence and sustainable return. I'd like to reaffirm JICA's unwavering commitment to support displaced people, leveraging our expertise as a development organization and working closely with all stakeholders. At this challenging time, let us renew our collaboration so that we make a tangible impact and demonstrate why this matters for the entire world, and build a future where no one is left behind. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ando-san, Senior Vice President of JICA. I will now give the floor for the speaker on behalf of the private sector, Mr. Said Al-Eter, CEO of the Mohammed bin Rashid Al Maktoum Global Initiatives. Mr. Said, you have the floor.
Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates, it's an honor to join the opening of the Global Forum, Global Refugee Forum. I thank UNHCR, United Nations, all member states and partners for their tireless commitment to bring relief and well-being to refugees and internally displaced people everywhere. I'm speaking today on behalf of a growing community of foundations that stand with UNHCR in responding to one of the defining challenges of our time, global displacement, where around the world more than 123 million people, as per UNHCR Global Trends report, have been forced to flee conflict, persecution, and climate shock. And despite the impressive efforts and the diligent commitment, the challenge is getting worse as we speak. The world is facing more conflicts. According to Global Peace Index briefing in 2025, our world is facing more conflicts than at any time since World War II. This in turn increased significantly the number of refugees and internally displaced people. Meanwhile, global funding for refugees aid is also declining, where UNHCR funds this year covers less than half of the needs as per the reports, a significant drop forcing major cuts in essential aid. Ladies and gentlemen, we are indeed facing a compounding crisis, or our current strategies and careful system and sincere efforts might fall short. This is why we must think differently. We must think of a disruptive solutions also, while ensuring sustainability and inclusion of our core values. And allow me to share with you, with these great minds present here today, 2 quick ideas as food for thoughts. Maybe we need to create a massive shock of awareness to the globe. I mean, we understand the magnitude of the challenge, but does the world understand the same and the severity of the crisis? We want to create a massive shock of awareness about the refugee crisis globally. Awareness can change the game. It can ignite people's passion to help, to mobilize, not only on their personal resources, but also their communities and their governments. Why not having a global mega event that will make the whole world truly see the refugees? An event where, with all big celebrities, all big politicians, where can we wake the world up to realize the severity of the crisis? An event that mobilizes the hearts of individuals from all walks of life. We all may recall the event that stopped the world and changed the face of charity 40 years ago. Live Aid was one of the most ambitious concerts over to raise the global awareness and achieve social change. 2 stadiums, thousands of people, and 2 billion viewers in 125 countries. And that was 40 years ago. And I'm sure we can do something better in 2025. Awareness can truly change the game, and we in Mohammed bin Rashid Global Initiatives in BRGI will be happy to be part of this initiative. And one other idea I wanted to share today is, what if we can create a platform, a virtual space, where we can connect the 2 worlds, the world of privilege with that of the underprivileged, where everyone of the privileged can help someone from the unprivileged world. A platform where every capable human being on the planet can log in, can choose to sponsor, to endorse, to support a refugee anywhere in the world. I'm aware that there are some number of similar projects implemented on local levels, but what I'm talking about here is different scope and scale. A mega platform that includes big number of refugees in one virtual space, accessible to every person willing to support around the world. And the same platform can be used for online job opportunities for displaced and qualified professionals. And the same platform also can be used for online education for refugee children and youth to provide them with more opportunities. Such a platform would help include refugees and internally displaced people into global economy and empower them also to create a dignified lives for themselves. And through this platform also, we can offer lots of online jobs also where they can be part of the global economy. These 2 quick ideas are meant just to stir the thinking into new directions to face our compounding challenges. At Mohammed bin Rashid Global Initiatives, we are determined to deepen our partnership with UNHCR and with the international private sector to devise creative, disruptive solutions that will effectively address the refugee crisis on our planet. I'm pleased to announce a new commitment where over the coming 3 years, MBRGI will commit $20 million pledge to support the refugees. Together, we can make the next... Thank you. Together, we can make the next decade of humanitarian work more effective, more sustainable, and more hopeful. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Said Al-Eter. Thank you also for your great ideas and your pledge, which is very welcome. I now give the floor to my friend, Magnus Brunner, the Commissioner for Internal Affairs and Migration of the European Union, speaking on behalf of regional organizations. Magnus, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, delegates. Dear Filippo, first of all, I would like to start saying thank you. Thanks to you, Filippo, for your service. Filippo, you did an amazing job, I would say. You took office at one of the most challenging times in the history of international protection, and for a decade you embodied the spirit of cooperation in all the multilateralism that defines both the European Union and the UN. So thank you very much indeed for this great work and for the cooperation. And I also welcome, of course, the incoming commissioner. You told us it's not sort of fixed yet, but we all know what we are talking about. We wish him, of course, every success also, and look very much forward to continuing our good working relationship. And we all know these are, of course, challenging times for our work in international protection, with new conflicts, of course, looming, and an uncertain commitment also from some of our global partners to upholding their commitments and their responsibilities. So let me say clearly on behalf of the European Union, the EU's support for the multilateral system of international protection is, of course, unwavering. And as we review our pledges made in 2023, I'm very proud to announce that we are on track to fulfill our commitments, with over 4 billion euros dispersed in the initial years of reporting. That's 40% of our commitment. First, our pledge to Ukraine, supporting anti-trafficking and unaccompanied children, and also providing special assistance like psychological care. Second, our continued support to Syria. The situation there, as we heard, has improved. That is good news, of course, but of course millions of Syrians still need our support, and we will continue to provide that. And at the same time, we need also to help manage the return of the increasing numbers of those who wish to go back and rebuild their country in a safe way, in a voluntary way, and also in a sustainable way. And third, our work with our international partners along the key migratory routes to strengthen protection and provide a high quality asylum spaces in host countries outside the European Union. And on this last point, I want to highlight how important partnerships is to us in Europe. As the European Union puts in place new migration reforms, we are very much committed to further enhancing our partnerships with UNHCR, with the IOM, and with the many host countries outside the European Union. For example, Mauritania is hosting more than 200,000 refugees from neighboring Mali, or Chad is hosting more than 1 million refugees from neighboring Sudan. These partners, I would say, deserve and also will continue to receive the European Union's support. And just as our current migration reform will allow us also to continue to provide support within the European Union. The negotiations for the new EU budget are still ongoing, but I can tell you there as well that we are doing everything we can to prioritize migration and asylum governance. And that being said, we all recognize that the current realities will require, of course, a sort of creative thinking, I would say. We need to think about ways of becoming more cost-effective, for example, by combining funding with private sector involvement, which we just heard, very good news there as well, or exploring the innovative funding solutions also. So let us use this time together to find those solutions. Thank you very much, and thanks to you, Filippo, for your work again, and all the best for your future, of course, as a citizen, as you mentioned, but also as a supporter. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Big thanks to Commissioner Brunner for his words. Je donne maintenant la parole à Madame Éléonore Carrois, ministre déléguée au ministère de l'Europe et des Affaires étrangères de la France, qui va parler comme État. Madame la ministre, vous avez la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, caro Filippo, Mesdames et Messieurs les ministres et membres de gouvernement, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants des États coparrains, Mesdames et Messieurs les représentants d'associations du secteur privé, Mesdames et Messieurs en vos grades et qualités. Il y a un an, jour pour jour, alors que j'étais députée des Français de l'étranger, j'étais dans un camp Rohingya à Cox's Bazar pour soutenir le travail remarquable accompli par les équipes des Nations Unies. Je me souviens en particulier du regard des enfants et des jeunes filles, ce mélange un peu de lassitude et cette force silencieuse dont certains ont parlé ce matin. J'ai aussi vu l'inquiétude des parents dans chaque regard. J'ai perçu cette fatigue, ce déracinement et cette attente d'une protection stable. C'est d'ailleurs ces mêmes regards qui avaient guidé 15 ans auparavant ma volonté de devenir avocate, alors que je défendais des demandeurs d'asile afghans, syriens à Paris. Ce souvenir reflète en réalité la réalité qui est vécue par tant de personnes, de familles déplacées, qui ont subi des conflits souvent prolongés, des phénomènes climatiques extrêmes. Et c'est l'urgence de soulager cette détresse humaine qui donne tout son sens au travail, à l'action remarquable du Haut-Commissariat aux réfugiés, à votre travail, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire. C'est donc un honneur pour moi de porter aujourd'hui la voix de la France, co-marraine de ce forum, aux côtés du Japon, de la Colombie, de la Jordanie, de l'Ouganda et de la Suisse. Alors que nous traversons une période de doute, de brutalité, d'instabilité croissante qui est marquée par des tensions géopolitiques, vous l'avez dit, mais aussi par des conflits, le dérèglement climatique, notre présence ici rappelle la nécessité d'une réponse collective pour protéger les plus vulnérables. À la fin du mois de juin 2025, il y avait 42,5 millions de personnes qui étaient réfugiées dans le monde, sans parler du chiffre impressionnant de déplacés dont vous avez parlé. Ce sont des chiffres vertigineux qui nous obligent à ne pas détourner le regard, à ne pas considérer que ce qui est loin de nous ne nous concerne pas, car il est de notre responsabilité de ne pas laisser ces personnes dans une situation d'inhumanité, d'indignité, et d'autre part parce que ça a un impact direct sur nos vies avec l'accélération des mouvements migratoires. Dès lors, 3 priorités doivent guider les efforts que nous déployons dans ce forum. Premièrement, continuer de renforcer la protection des réfugiés qui, outre l'exil, font face à des violences et à des discriminations multiples. Deuxièmement, continuer à soutenir les communautés d'accueil qui sont en première ligne face aux conséquences de ces drames. Et troisièmement, développer des solutions durables pour agir sur les causes profondes de l'exil et pour favoriser l'autonomie des réfugiés. Depuis 2023, la France a intensifié son partenariat stratégique avec le HCR, convaincue qu'il est dans l'intérêt de notre pays et des Françaises et des Français de promouvoir des réponses durables et efficaces. Du Soudan à l'Ukraine, en passant par les Grands Lacs ou la Syrie, nous avons porté ensemble un soutien opérationnel dans les régions où les besoins sont les plus récents. Et je remercie le HCR, qui est un partenaire clé de notre diplomatie, d'avoir été à nos côtés dans la conférence du Soudan en 2024 et plus récemment sur celle des Grands Lacs cette année. Notre coopération avec le HCR va au-delà des réponses d'urgence. Lors des Jeux Olympiques de Paris, nous avons mis à l'honneur une équipe extraordinaire d'athlètes réfugiés. Vous l'avez rappelé ce matin. Et je voudrais saluer Zakia, qui a pris la parole ce matin au nom de cette équipe incroyable de réfugiés, et la féliciter d'ailleurs pour ses exploits. Notre partenariat implique aussi un dialogue annuel de protection en France et surtout l'appui par notre réseau diplomatique aux équipes du HCR qui sont déployées sur le terrain et auxquelles je voudrais rendre hommage aujourd'hui. En 2023, la France avait aussi lancé le programme Avec elle, qui apporte un soutien spécifique aux femmes et aux filles réfugiées. C'est une initiative qui a accueilli plus de 40 engagements d'acteurs publics français et internationaux, mais aussi d'ONG, et d'acteurs privés. Ensemble, nous partageons une conviction profonde. Le respect du droit international et la protection des civils ouvrent un chemin, le seul chemin d'ailleurs, vers la paix. Alors que de nombreuses puissances détournent le regard, nous sommes ici aujourd'hui pour rappeler notre soutien indéfectible au HCR. Ce soutien qui répond à l'intensification des besoins humanitaires et au calvaire des populations déplacées. Le pacte mondial sur les réfugiés doit demeurer notre boussole. Il organise la solidarité internationale, il répartit les responsabilités et il renforce la stabilité mondiale. Il s'appuie sur la Convention de 1951, qui est un pilier du droit international moderne, qui est aussi notre boussole. Ça fixe un cap clair pour la communauté internationale. Cela doit renforcer notre capacité à protéger et à accueillir dans la durée. C'est cette conviction qui avait guidé notre engagement lors du Forum de 2023. C'est aussi ce qui guide notre préparation du Forum de 2027, et c'est la raison pour laquelle nous sommes ici. Et donc d'ici 2027, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, Mesdames et Messieurs, la France tiendra ses engagements. Nous renforcerons la protection des réfugiés dans l'urgence comme dans la durée. Nous soutiendrons la coopération internationale et nous la souhaitons encore plus ambitieuse et encore mieux partagée. Nous accompagnerons davantage les communautés d'accueil en intégrant les enjeux climatiques et les enjeux de genre dans nos financements, car cela nous semble être essentiel. Et nous agirons enfin sur les causes profondes des déplacements forcés, les conflits, la pauvreté, les fragilités institutionnelles. Et puis, parce que cela est extrêmement important, nous placerons les femmes et les filles au cœur de nos actions. Elles renforcent la résilience des familles, portent l'avenir dans des périodes de reconstruction. Alors, Monsieur le Haut-Commissaire, sur une note plus personnelle et à la veille de votre départ, je veux saluer au nom de la France le bilan de vos 10 ans d'engagement à la tête du HCR. Vous avez montré, avec un grand humanisme, un vrai sens du dialogue, qu'une action déterminée peut protéger des millions de vies. Et donc je vous remercie au nom de mon pays pour ces années de coopération étroite et de confiance réciproque. Aux côtés de votre successeur, et comme les uns et les autres, je ne m'avancerai pas davantage car je sais que nous sommes en processus de nomination, mais je sais que nous continuerons à agir avec la même détermination, la même confiance et le même sens du devoir, et que nous avancerons ensemble avec la certitude que notre action renforce la stabilité et la paix internationale. Alors bons travaux à tous et je vous remercie.
Merci, Madame la Ministre déléguée. Now, last of this group, but certainly not least, my dear friend, Charlotte Slente, Secretary General of the Danish Refugee Council, will speak, representing civil society.
Thank you very much. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, representatives of refugees and displaced populations from across the world, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to start adding my deep appreciation to High Commissioner Grandi for his tireless work on upholding refugee protection globally and for his commitment to understanding the lived realities of refugees. As refugee norms are increasingly being contested, we'll continue needing a staunch advocate for refugees and refugees' rights at UNHCR. So we look forward to welcoming the incoming High Commissioner to carry the baton forward. 3 weeks ago, I was in Adra by the Chad-Sudanese border. Adra was once a modest town of 15,000 people in eastern Chad. Today, it has swelled dramatically, absorbing more than 230,000 refugees who have crossed the border from Sudan. While there, I met refugees that had fled El Fasher in Darfur. The level of trauma I witnessed in Adra is unlike anything I've ever seen before. Every person I met had escaped massacre. Nearly everyone had lost a loved one, often several, before or during their flight from Darfur. Women whispered to me their ordeals passing through 40 checkpoints to get to Sudan. The bloodstains from the horrors in El Fasher can be seen from space, while the widespread sexual and gender-based violence remains hidden from view. I spoke with Adra's residents, local leaders, and Chad's government, and despite being among the world's poorest countries, where people already struggle for income, education, and healthcare, Chad has taken in more than 800,000 Sudanese refugees this year alone. Yet, this generosity is not matched globally. Chad's humanitarian response plan is funded at just 26%. We see a similar pattern in many other neighboring countries hosting large numbers of refugees. In Uganda, for example, which hosts nearly 2 million refugees and asylum seekers, including from DR Congo and South Sudan, its policy of granting refugees freedom of movement, access to land, education, and national health systems is under increasing strain. In third quarter of this year, the Uganda refugee response plan was only 22% funded. Over 2/3 of the world's refugees are in neighboring states, and nearly 3/4 of these are hosted in low and low middle-income countries. DRC's global displacement forecasting model predicts a 3 million increase in the number of displaced people in 2026. And if current dynamics persist, overall forced displacement could exceed 130 million by 2030. Displacement figures are ballooning to new extraordinary heights by the convergence of violent conflict, deepening fragility, and climate-related vulnerabilities, and neighboring refugee host countries are buckling under the strains of new arrivals. Meanwhile, donor countries are cutting their humanitarian aid, and some UN member states are seeking to introduce increasingly militarized and punitive approaches to people seeking protection across borders. This includes proposals to establish return centers out of the EU, increase the risk of detention for those seeking safety from persecution, and weaken efficient remedy and protection against refoulement, a cornerstone of the Refugee Convention, which has protected millions of people from persecution since it came into effect nearly 75 years ago. At this year's GRF Progress Review, DRC is focusing on important commitments towards several multi-stakeholder pledges, including the Global Legal Community Pledge, the Self-Reliance Pledge initiative, and supporting meaningful participation of young people in processes that concern them. The lack of access to legal aid inhibits refugees and other displaced people's ability to claim and enjoy their rights, including their ability to access protection, humanitarian assistance, and services such as healthcare, shelter, education, and employment opportunities. Combined with short-term emergency assistance, holistic self-reliance programming needs to remain a priority to ensure displaced populations can live in dignity and pursue a durable solution. We must ensure refugee voices shape the decisions which impact them. It's very encouraging to see so many young people are participating this year, and for us to hear their recommendations on how they can live their lives in peace and in dignity. It's imperative that convenings such as the GRF and its review process identify and make tangible progress on global solutions to forced displacement. Solutions which preserve the rights of those seeking safety and ensure commitments to refugee protection are upheld by all member states, rather than making pledges and then pursuing policies which contribute to a polarizing public atmosphere and the gradual dehumanization of people in need for safety. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Charlotte. Before we start the plenary discussion, we will now hear a recorded statement from the United Nations Secretary General Antonio Guterres.
I send my warmest greetings as you gather for this important progress review. Since the Global Refugee Forum 2 years ago, we have seen more conflict, more displacement, more closed borders, and sharp cuts in humanitarian funding. But the Global Compact on Refugees still points the way forward. We must increase support for host countries, especially the low and middle-income countries, welcoming nearly 3/4 of the world's refugees. We must boost refugee inclusion and self-reliance, a dignified way to unlock human potential, lift up local economies, and lower dependency on aid. We must expand third country solutions like family reunification and resettlement, recognizing that for some refugees there simply are no local solutions. And we must enable people to safely return home, as 1 million Syrians have done in the past 12 months. I commend 1,300 partners working to advance these aims, from governments and development banks to businesses, civil society, refugee-led organizations and faith leaders. I welcome the nearly 3,500 pledges they have made over the past 7 years. And I applaud the results they have delivered, like new labor laws that support refugee employment, more access to higher education for young refugees, and strengthened asylum processes in some countries. Now I urge the world to do more, providing safety, opportunity and solutions where they are needed most. I am deeply grateful to Filippo Grandi, who has championed this vision while leading UNHCR during some of the biggest humanitarian crises in living memory. As his mandate draws to a close, let us continue working together to invest in refugees and host communities, and to defend and uphold the right to seek asylum and protection, a fundamental pillar of international law. Thank you.
We thank the Secretary General for his message, and allow me, before we move to the plenary, a very short pause to say goodbye to Federal Councillor Ignacio Cassis with my and our heartfelt thanks for having participated in the opening of this progress review and for all his support to this cause, to UNHCR and to me personally. Grazie Ignazio, grazie ancora. Ladies and gentlemen, we can now start the plenary session, and joining me on the podium, joining me on the podium to co-chair this morning's session is Mr. Agrey David Kibenge, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development of Uganda, whom we heard from earlier. Very welcome, Mr. Kibenge. And in fact, it is Mr. Kibenge who will chair. I will just assist him. And sorry, I said goodbye to the Federal Councillor. I didn't say goodbye to Zakia because she will stay here. I think she will stay here with us, but of course, big thanks to her. Un grand merci, Zakia, encore une fois, pour votre contribution à la session de ce matin. Mr. Kibenge, I pass the baton to you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have been introduced. I'm Agrey David Kibenge, Permanent Secretary at the Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development of Uganda, and as co-convener, I will assist in co-chairing the next part of this morning's session. I would now like to commence the plenary discussion As communicated by the Secretariat during the preparations for today's meeting, we will not strictly adhere to protocol for the speaking order during the general debate in order to make space for other stakeholders who are key to contributing to the objectives of the GCR. We will, however, first hear from those delegations represented at ministerial level. If you wish to take the floor, please raise your nameplate. We will do our best to accommodate as many requests as possible over the next 3 days. Should you need to leave the room, please temporarily lower your nameplate to avoid your delegation being called upon. Given the limited available time, we will not be able to hear group statements from governments during the plenary discussion. However, group statements may be shared with the Secretariat for posting on the web page. I wish to remind delegations to limit their remarks to 3 minutes. You also kindly requested to keep remarks focused on key outcomes, challenges, recommendations for the future to help guide our collective engagement in the coming years, including as we look ahead to the next GRF in 2027. With this in mind, let's get started. I'll first call on the co-conveners of the 2023 GRF before turning to other delegations. It is my pleasure now to invite the distinguished representative of Colombia to make your statement.
Muchas gracias, señor presidente. Colombia, como auspiciador del foro, agradece este encuentro para revisar, junto a Suiza como país anfitrión y bajo la batuta del ACNUR, los compromisos adquiridos hace 2 años con el Pacto Mundial sobre Refugiados. En este periodo, los cambios políticos, sociales y financieros han puesto a prueba nuestra humanidad y nuestra solidaridad. Agradezco la generosidad de Uganda como principal país receptor de refugiados en África, el ejemplo de solidaridad y humanidad de Jordania y el apoyo de Japón y Francia como principales donantes. Colombia conoce de primera mano las causas y consecuencias del desplazamiento forzado. Durante décadas hemos enfrentado el conflicto armado más prolongado del hemisferio occidental y al mismo tiempo nos hemos convertido en uno de los principales países de acogida de personas refugiadas y migrantes en el mundo. Como país de origen, tránsito, destino y retorno, promovemos respuestas centradas en la dignidad humana, la inclusión y las soluciones duraderas. Colideramos junto a Egipto, Noruega y el Departamento de Asuntos Políticos y de Consolidación de la Paz de la ONU el compromiso multipartes sobre construcción de paz y prevención de conflictos. Colombia lo ha implementado reconociendo a 56 víctimas del conflicto armado en Colombia exiliadas en Suiza, cumpliendo así recomendaciones de nuestra Comisión de la Verdad, reconociendo la responsabilidad del Estado y promoviendo la reconciliación. Actos similares se adelantan en otros países que han acogido a exiliados colombianos. Lideramos a nivel mundial la promoción de alternativas a la detención de personas migrantes, reafirmando que ningún niño, niña o adolescente debe ser detenido por su situación migratoria, lo cual se ha traducido en la regularización de millones de seres humanos. La solidaridad no es solo un principio, sino una política pública concreta. Como coauspiciador, impulsamos compromisos en deporte, inclusión socioeconómica, protección de la niñez, prevención de la apatridia y acceso universal a la salud. También mantenemos firme nuestro compromiso con la cooperación regional, la responsabilidad compartida y la implementación efectiva de soluciones duraderas a través de la presidencia de la plataforma de apoyo del MIRPS. Este miércoles haremos el anuncio de 2 compromisos adicionales. Colombia cree firmemente que el desplazamiento forzado no debe gestionarse solamente como una crisis, sino abordarse como una oportunidad para fortalecer la paz, la inclusión y el multilateralismo. Antes de finalizar, permítame, señor Grandi, manifestarle el agradecimiento de Colombia por su arduo y comprometido trabajo durante los últimos 9 años. Agradecemos el apoyo y asistencia del ACNUR bajo su liderazgo, que nos ha permitido atender a millones de desplazados internos y a millones de extranjeros que ahora acogen a Colombia como su lugar de acogida. Muchas gracias.
We should have heard from France, but they've already earlier made a statement this morning. I'll now move to Japan. The distinguished representative from Japan.
Co-chairs, distinguished guests, I'm Toshimi Nishizaki, Ambassador for Humanitarian Assistance. It is my honor to serve in this position, which was newly established by the Japanese government in November as a mark of its commitment to addressing humanitarian crisis. Let me first express our gratitude to the host countries and communities that have received many refugees and displaced persons amid today's unprecedented displacement crisis. It's essential that diverse stakeholders collaborate to find sustainable and effective solutions. Allow me to share some examples of Japan's efforts in this regard. The Multi-Stakeholder Pledge Initiative is increasingly important as a framework for advancing cooperation. Japan is steadily implementing the 9 pledges announced at the second Global Refugee Forum. Furthermore, Japan's leading an MSP on the Humanitarian Development Peace Nexus in collaboration with UNDP. To realize HDP Nexus, Japan is also implementing numerous resilience-focused projects through JICA and with international organizations. For example, we provided support focused on the need of forcibly displaced Rohingya and their host communities. We will also provide approximately $5.4 million for Syria through UNHCR in response to increasing refugee returns. In May last year, we supported the establishment of the Africa East Center, which is being conducting training for humanitarian personnel in security measures and early crisis response. Furthermore, we continue to emphasize the HDP Nexus by organizing an event during TICAT 9 in Japan this August, and by co-hosting 6 HDP Nexus Roundtable at the global level. In October, Japan also hosted the Ukraine Mine Action Conference 2025 to facilitate the safe return of displaced persons. Ladies and gentlemen, Japan strongly supports UNHCR's activities. Subject to Diet approval, Japan pledged a new contribution of $77.4 million to the UNHCR, much of which comprise matching support. Japan's considered way to alleviate, even slightly, the additional burden host countries incur in accepting refugees. Therefore, sustained by the concept of the HDP Nexus and in collaboration with the Green Climate Fund, Japan launched a new initiative in South Sudan addressing both refugee issues and climate change. Japan is also pursuing a new project in Ethiopia. These initiatives, undertaken with partners including UNHCR and UNDP, are matching support for the generous refugee policies demonstrated by host countries. In closing, I would like to express my heartfelt respect and deep gratitude to Mr. Filippo Grandi, UN High Commissioner for Refugees, who's devoted himself to standing with the most vulnerable and is a very embodiment of the principle of human security. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now have a statement from the distinguished representative of Jordan.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the compassionate, the merciful, Mr. High Commissioner, distinguished delegates, refugee representatives, ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of High Commissioner of Jordan, a proud co-convener of the 2023 Global Refugee Forum, I extend a warm welcome to all gathered today. Your presence reflects not only commitment, but a shared dedication to one of humanity's most pressing causes. His Majesty's address to the Forum 2 years ago guides our compass for shared responsibilities and values, and this midterm progress review represents a critical political milestone at a highly sensitive international juncture where record levels of forced displacement interact with declining humanitarian funding and mounting pressures on international protection system. It must serve as an opportunity to assess the actual implementation of pledges, not merely a technical review or a procedural exercise. Colleagues, as we gather today, precisely 70 years after Jordan joined the United Nations on the 14th of December 1955, we reaffirm our unwavering faith in multilateral systems that have guided the global cooperation since 1945. Jordan's position stems from decades of shouldering immense responsibilities as a host country, driven by a profound humanitarian and moral duty. And we continue to host over 1.3 million Syrian brothers and sisters, most living within local communities, and our model of stability and resilience cannot be sustained without international support commensurate with the scale of burden. The current funding crisis is not merely financial by nature. It's a political choice. It's a profound humanitarian social challenge leading to reduction in cash and food assistance, protection programs, and livelihood. This threatens increased poverty and vulnerability in refugees and host communities alike, undermining peace and security everywhere. Excellencies, despite this pressure, we acknowledge notable progress in areas such as education, access to health, and multi-stakeholder partnership. I take this opportunity to express Jordan's deep gratitude to you, High Commissioner, Mr. Grandi, and to entire UNHCR team for their unwavering dedication, operational excellence, and partnership in supporting refugees and host countries like ours, even amid severe resource constraints. Yet, the true measure of success for our shared responsibilities lies in implementation. Pledges alone are insufficient. Credibility is gauged by our ability to translate commitments into tangible results on the ground. Many previous pledges remain unimplemented or unfunded, and the principle of equitable burden and responsibility share remains far from being balanced applicable. Dear colleagues, on protected situations, including the Syrian crisis, we welcome the significant voluntary returns in 2025, with over 150,000 Syrians returning from Jordan. This is a positive development, but sustainability demands serious international investment in early recovery, reconstruction, and basic services in countries of origin as well. Otherwise, the risk of renewed displacement persists. We warmly welcome the United Nations UNGA's resolution 10 days ago to renew UNRWA's mandate, vital for nearly 5.9 million Palestinian refugees, over 40% of whom reside in Jordan. Dear colleagues, this meeting, as expected, will bring strong voices of support to the most vulnerable and their hosts. But will this reach their immediate needs of food, of health, of education, of livelihood? Let us move beyond viewing refugees as mere numbers. They are human beings. They do have dreams. They deserve to be invested in their future. And for us, this is the true path for our collective stability and security. In conclusion, this midterm review must be a political moment to recalculate our course and reinvigorate international commitment, Jordan will continue to fulfill its humanitarian role with responsibility, but we emphasize on the success of the global refugee regime depends on tangible, equitable support for host countries and investment in regional and global stability, not merely an expression of solidarity. Together, let us renew our pledges with action, bridge gaps with resolve, and build towards a more equitable future for refugees and hosts alike, aiming into renewed commitments for our shared values. I thank you.
And finally, on the part of the co-conveners, I would now like to deliver Uganda's statement. I am honored to lead the delegation as one of the co-conveners of the 2023 GRF. Uganda made 5 ambitious pledges to strengthen the sustainability of the Ugandan model. These are self-reliance, climate and environment, localization, durable solutions, and transitioning services from humanitarian to government management. 2 years later, these pledges remain highly relevant, but implementation is increasingly challenged by the current context. As a host to nearly 2 million refugees, that is expected to rise further in 2026. Our generous refugee response is unfortunately facing an unprecedented challenge informed by the collapse in funding. More than ever, this GRF progress review in these tough financial times is not only important, but very rather extremely relevant to renew our collective support to forcibly displaced persons globally. Uganda has conducted a thorough national stock-taking process, including partner surveys and a 2-day national review, and we are pleased to share key achievements. Firstly, on the resilience and self-reliance pledge, Uganda has made major strides toward this pledge to create 300,000 economic opportunities, with over 237,000 already achieved. A major milestone is the launch of the National Self-Reliance Index, creating a unified system to measure progress. Job centers and over 15,000 technical vocational education and training scholarships are helping young people transition into employment. In agriculture, more than 100,000 smallholder farmers have adopted climate-smart practices, and over 20 value chains have been developed. Strong partnerships with Japan on rice schemes, Netherlands under the Prospects Program, Uganda Refugee Resilience Initiative funded by Denmark, and WFP have helped scale market-based and graduation approaches. Second, on the localization pledge, Uganda is strengthening national and local responders to enhance sustainability. A national localization strategy is being finalized, and localization provisions have been integrated into the National Development Plan. Over 1,100 local organizations have received capacity support, and innovative models such as staff secondments from international NGOs are helping transfer technical skills. The next step is boosting accountability and increasing the share of funding to local actors towards the 25% target. Thirdly, on the pledge of transition management, Uganda is committed to shifting from parallel humanitarian systems to government-led service delivery. A national transition strategy now guides this process. Significant progress has been made in the water sector, with rehabilitation and handover facilities to national utilities. However, the financing crisis poses a major risk. Many teachers, health workers, and other personnel in refugee settlements are still funded by partners. Sustained, predictable financing is essential to avoid reversing gains. Fourth pledge on durable solutions, Uganda continues to support voluntary repatriation, resettlement, and complementary pathways. While repatriation is currently feasible, mainly for Burundian refugees, 3,810 have returned. Complementary pathways are expanding, benefiting 14,200 individuals. Uganda has also taken important steps on civil registration, issuing over 250,000 birth certificates and 147,000 travel documents, strengthening regional cooperation through the IGAD and the East African community remains a priority. The fifth and final pledge was on climate, environment, and energy. And Uganda has integrated refugee issues into national climate policies and advanced clean energy access. With strong partnerships such as Solco and Eco-Adapt, over 29,000 households now use clean cooking solutions, and 4,000 hectares of degraded ecosystems have been restored. Going forward, Uganda aims to include refugees in the next nationally determined contributions and expand access to global climate finance. Finally, despite significant challenges, especially the current liquidity crisis in the humanitarian field, I am proud to update that my government has played its part within our means with strong progress across all pledges. What remains is the financial matching to actualize our policy pledges. While reaffirming our commitment to the fulfillment of our pledges, we count on our donor partners to closely cooperate and fund our refugee response with timely, flexible, and predictable funding to sustain inclusion of refugees in national systems. It is a global good. Last but not least, thank you, Mr. Filippo Grandi. Thank you for not only steering the UNHCR, but thank you very much for being a loyal and dependable friend of hosting countries, especially Uganda. I thank you for your attention. Ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to open the floor to other participants and enlarge the discussion. I now give the floor to the distinguished delegate from Nigeria. Remember the time we allocated?
Your Excellency, High Commissioner, distinguished delegate excellencies, on behalf of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, led by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, I'm honored to address the Global Refugee Forum as we take stock on our collective progress toward 2027 pledge targets. Nigeria remains fully committed to the Global Compact of Refugees and presenting the protection solution for refugees, asylum seekers, internally displaced persons, returnees, and stateless persons. In review of the pledge, we made pledge in 5 thematic areas: enhancing self-reliance, social protection, inclusion, education, health, and gender violence prevention and response. In enhancing reliance, Nigeria pledged to ensure that at least 25% of working-age refugees and host communities benefited from skill acquisition, agricultural development, and livelihood opportunities. We are pleased to report that the CAF Reflection Center has been launched in June 2025 by First Lady of Nigeria, Senator Oluremi Tinubu. It has resettled 38 internally displaced person households and 12 refugee households, each receiving housing and skill development support. Across subnational level, states like Akwa Ibom, Benue, Cross River, Taraba, Borno, and Katsina State, over 1,000 hectares of farmland have been donated by the state government for refugees and host community in agriculture to aid agricultural protection. The LIFE project is expanding large-scale agricultural value chains, climate-smart farming, market access, cooperative strengthening, and job creation across multiple states. More than 2,900 individuals are enrolled in vocational training centers in Banki and Goza. On social protection, Nigeria pledged to ensure that vulnerable refugees and host communities are integrated into national and state social protection system. Our national social registry that contains about 18.9 million households, and also the state social register included our refugees in it. Further state-level advocacy is under the way to expand this inclusion nationwide. On education, Nigeria is committed to 100% basic education enrollment for refugees, children, and equal access to tertiary education. Today, refugee children at basic, secondary, and tertiary level are fully integrated into the national educational system with equal access to admission, learning, and certification. At subnational level, states such as Taraba and Benue have provided free primary and secondary school education, and also provides scholarship to refugee students. Teachers' enrollment and teacher deployment and school infrastructure have been strengthened in refugee hosting areas. On health, Nigeria pledged full inclusion of refugees in the national public health system. The Basic Health Care Production Fund, which includes HIV, malaria, TB, and nutrition program targeting, has included a lot of refugees. At state level, Lagos has enrolled refugees in the Elera Eco Insurance Scheme. Advocacy continues to expand the model and the models to all hosting states. On the gender-based violence prevention and response, we have a nationwide advocacy, town hall engagement, and sensitization campaigns have been scaled up to address underreporting. Partnership with women-led refugee organizations are improving survival support, community engagement, and case management. Gender-based violence training for civil society organizations and community leaders are ongoing across many states in Nigeria. Women cooperatives in Katsina and other states are being supported with economic empowerment initiatives. These achievements are not without challenges. We face challenges of financial limitation affecting infrastructure and service delivery. So also there is still a challenge of insecurity, making some areas to be hard to reach, and in execution of a durable solution. Looking forward, Nigeria is committed to strengthening public partnership with leading national philanthropists, including the BUA and Angote groups, to diversify humanitarian financing. We also pledge enhancing coordination with development partners and calling for renewed commitment to the principle of equitable burden and responsibility sharing. We also wish to accelerate documentation, livelihood, education, and health inclusion to ensure refugee or displaced persons are not left behind. We also wish to enforce the institutional capacity to uphold a robust and humane asylum regime, including clearing outstanding registration backlog. In conclusion, Your Excellencies, Nigeria's commitment to the Global Compact on Refugee remains unwavering. We will continue to safeguard rights and dignity of all displaced persons within our borders, while deepening partnership and strengthening resilience, empower communities, and promote durable solutions. Together, with shared responsibility and solidarity, we can build a future where no refugee is denied hope, opportunity, or protection. We thank all our development partners and also for collaborating with us to make life for refugees comfortable and also addressing challenges of our refugees. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigeria. Nigeria will be followed by South Sudan, Egypt, Gambia, Lesotho, and if time permits, North Macedonia in that order. So South Sudan.
Mr. Filippo Grandi, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. I bring warm greetings from His Excellency Salva Kiir Mayardit, the President of the Republic of South Sudan, and from the people of South Sudan. We convene at this high-level forum at a pivotal moment to take stock of progress, identify implementation gaps, and reinforce our collective resolve to deliver on the commitments made under the Global Refugees Forum. For the Republic of South Sudan, this platform is not merely an accountability milestone. It is a strategic opportunity to demonstrate how national leadership, evidence-based planning, and a strong multi-stakeholder partnership can translate pledges into measurable, durable, and people-centered outcomes. Since the second Global Refugees Forum in 2023, South Sudan has made tangible progress in implementing its 6 GRF pledges across the thematic areas of peacebuilding, education, jobs and livelihoods, climate and environment, protection and documentation, and statelessness. A major milestone has been the adoption of National Durable Solution Strategy and Plan of Action, which provides coordinated, inclusive, and accountable framework for action at both national and state level. This strategy reinforces government leadership, leverages humanitarian and development actors' capacities, and aligns institutional mandates. Importantly, it shifts the focus from return alone to sustainable reintegration and recovery, anchored in access to basic services, livelihood, and long-term resilience. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, allow me to highlight some key achievements. One, South Sudan has acceded to the 1954 and 1961 Statelessness Convention, reaffirming its commitment to preventing and ending statelessness. To date, over 21,000 returnees have been supported to acquire nationality and other civil and legal documentation. Two, from Sudan, 80 refugees professors have been integrated into higher education institutions, alongside 50 refugees health professionals absorbed into the national health system. Refugees and asylum seekers have also increased their participation in small business and joint enterprise with the communities. Three, more than 600 refugees and host community members have been trained in vocational skills, while approximately 17,100 individuals have benefited from market-based livelihood initiatives, including microloans and entrepreneurship mentorship. Four, agricultural land has been allocated to strengthen refugees and returnees' livelihood, with 76 agricultural cooperatives legally registered in Jamjang, Ruweng administrative area. These cooperatives are supported through grants that benefits both refugees and host community. Fifth, continued progress has been made in protection and documentation, supported by policy, legislation, and reform. Six, the South Sudan Early Warning for All roadmap has been operationalized, including the water at heart climate action, strengthening climate services, and multi-hazard early warning system. Seven, disaster risk reduction committees has been established to enhance risk governance at national and state and community levels. Eight, over 240,000 refugees have been covered by South Sudan Flood Preparedness and Response Plan 2025. Nine, more than 500 individuals in refugees hosting areas have been engaged through Cash for Work initiative, supporting the planting of over 40,000 tree seedlings. 10, area-based initiatives have been expanded in refugees and returnees locations, including Malakal, Reng, Maban, and Bentiu, scaling up successful approach initially identified as pockets of hope. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, despite these noble gains, significant challenges persist. First, the ongoing economic crisis and severe funding shortfalls have resulted into major pragmatic scale downs, staff reductions, offices closure across UN agencies, NGOs, and national partners. These constraints have critically undermined the delivery of essential services, including protection, health, education, food assistance, and livelihood support. Second, South Sudan continues to shoulder compounded displacement pressures, hosting over 600,000 refugees and asylum seekers, alongside more than 1.7 million returnees, many of whom remain unable to reach or sustainably reintegrate into their areas of origin. Third, the issuance of maturable refugees identification and travel documents has slowed due to limited resources, restricting access to banking, livelihoods, mobility, education, and specialized medical services abroad. As displacement dynamics grow increasingly complex, our shared responsibility is clear. We must move decisively from commitments to impact, advancing sustainable and inclusive solutions that strengthen resilience, stability, and dignity for displaced population and their host communities. Finally, while South Sudan remains firmly committed to inclusive and sustainable solutions, this progress cannot be sustained without renewed, predictable, and coordinated international solidarity. We therefore call for enhanced support to fully operationalize the National Durable Solution Strategy, strengthen national system, and scale up area-based approaches in high-return and refugees hosting locations. I thank you.
Thank you, South Sudan. Just a quick reminder, if we are going to accommodate a number of statements, let's try to keep within the time. I want to invite Egypt, followed by Gambia and Lesotho in that order. Egypt.
Excellency, Mr. Filippo Grandi, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Excellencies, distinguished delegates. Allow me to begin by expressing Egypt's profound appreciation to Mr. Filippo Grandi as he concludes his distinguished service as UN High Commissioner for Refugees. His tenure has been marked by exceptional leadership, principled advocacy, and an unwavering commitment to strengthening the international protection system at a time of unprecedented global displacements. Under his leadership, cooperation between Egypt and UNHCR has reached its closest, most constructive, and most comprehensive levels, spanning operational coordination and joint initiatives to improve the lives of refugees and host communities. Egypt also extends its gratitude to UNHCR for 7 decades of constructive partnerships since the signing of the 1954 Memorandum of Understanding with the government of Egypt. Over the past year in particular, we highly value UNHCR efforts to jointly developing a phased transition plan aligned with our national priorities to gradually shift from a UNHCR-led asylum system to a nationally owned asylum system established under Egypt's new Asylum Law number 164 of 2024. Excellencies, Egypt's approach to migrants, refugees, and asylum seekers is grounded in full respect for human dignity and human rights, consistent with our obligations under the 1951 UN Refugee Convention and the 1969 OAU Convention. Egypt guarantees freedom of movement, enabling refugees to live within host communities and access education and health care on an equal basis with Egyptians without discrimination. Many refugees also benefit from national social support programs, ensuring that no one is left behind. Egypt's situation is unlikely challenging. We host over 1 million refugees and asylum seekers registered with UNHCR, the vast majority originating from neighboring countries suffering protected crises. Additionally, millions of others live in a refugee-like situations, having resided in Egypt for more than a decade without seeking international protection. This places immense pressure on national systems and underscores the urgency of genuine burden and responsibility sharing, a core principle of the Global Compact for Refugees. It is in this context, Egypt maintains a long-standing out-of-camp policy, which allows refugees the dignity of movement and supports their integration into society, directly reflecting the objectives of the Global Compact. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, Egypt's Asylum Law number 164 of 2024 is among the first dedicated asylum laws in our region, marking a transformative step toward a comprehensive national asylum system aligned with international standards. The law guarantees access to primary health care, primary education, the former labor market, freedom of movement, legal residency, and recognition of foreign education certificates. Importantly, it prioritizes group in vulnerable situations, including unaccompanied children, older persons, pregnant women, and survivors of trafficking. In line with the pledges Egypt submitted at the 2023 Global Refugees Forum, Egypt continues to advance the implementation of its 3 pledges, namely enhancing the inclusion of refugees and asylum seekers in national health and education systems, strengthening the humanitarian development peace nexus to address the root causes of forced displacement and support post-conflict peace building, and tackling the impact of climate change on displacement with a particular focus on sustaining peace in Africa. Tangible progress has been achieved across these areas, reflected in expanded access for refugees to public education and healthcare services, the rollout of capacity-building programs, and the launch of regional initiatives that integrate climate resilience into displacement prevention strategies. Excellencies, as global displacement reaches unprecedented levels, no country, whether a host or donor, can meet these challenges alone. Egypt reaffirms its commitment to international cooperation and calls upon the global community to match responsibility with solidarity. I thank you.
Thank you. We will have the statement from the distinguished delegate from Gambia. followed by Lesotho.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I have the honor to convey the greetings of His Excellency the President, the government, and the people of the Republic of the Gambia, and to express our sincere appreciation to the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, the government of Switzerland, and all partners whose continued dedication has made this important gathering possible. As global displacement reaches record level, this forum remains the primary space where we access whether our collective commitment have been translated into concrete protection and solutions. For the Gambia, this process is both essential and timely, as it comes as a moment when national systems are under strain and predictable international support is more critical than ever. At the Global Refugee Forum in 2023, the Gambia presented a set of pledges carefully framed around concrete challenges we face in the area of nationality, statelessness, local integration, and protection sensitivity response to mixed movement. These pledges reflect the commitment of the government to address these issues in a progressive and structured manner, within clearly defined timeline. 3 of these pledges were scheduled for completion by the end of 2025, with the 4th extending to the end of 2026. This progress review therefore comes at a decisive midpoint of our implementation efforts. Under the pledge on nationality, the government of the Gambia committed to review the nationality and citizenship provision of the 1997 Constitution in order to facilitate the naturalization of refugees and stateless persons, addressing existing legal gaps and introduce safeguards against statelessness, including for children born on Gambian territory who will otherwise be stateless. Progress on this pledge has necessarily been shaped by the broader constitutional review context. While the constitutional reform process has faced delay, the government has taken complementary and interim measures to address the protection risks identified. In this regard, the government has initiated an executive-led process to regularize the legal status of long-term residents of Ghana Town, a long-established community in the Greater Banjul area, supported by a multi-agency task force drawn from relevant institutions with technical support from the UNHCR. This process focuses on re-registration and status determination as interim measures to address documentation gap and mitigate immediate protection risk, while long-term constitutional and legislative reform under this pledge continue to be pursued. Our second pledge commits to aligning nationality legislation policies and administrative practice with international standards in order to prevent and reduce statelessness in line with the principle of the 1954 Convention relating to the status of stateless persons and the 1961 Convention on the reduction of statelessness, to which the Gambia acceded in 2014. As part of this commitment, the Gambia has prioritized evidence-based and people-centered measures to strengthen identification, prevention, and response mechanisms. In June 2024, the government conducted its first national statelessness survey through a partnership between the Gambia Commission for Refugees and the UNHCR multi-country office in Dhaka. The finding of this survey, together with subsequent assessment presented to the National Assembly, indicated that more than 600 residents of Ghana Town could be affected within a community estimated at approximately 1,500 residents, many of whom were born and raised in the Gambia. This evidence is informing ongoing policy discussion on implementation measures aimed at reducing statelessness risk. In parallel, administrative safeguards to prevent statelessness have been strengthened through sensitization on birth registration and the inclusion of children at risk, including refugees, children born in the Gambia with a national civil and birth registration system. Through this effort, more than 400 late birth certificates were issued to Gambians above 5 years of age, and 171 birth certificates were issued to refugees, children born in the Gambia, contributing to the reduction of statelessness risk among children in 2023. On Pledge 3, which focuses on enhancing legal integration mechanism and ensuring the inclusion of refugees and stateless persons in basic social plan strategies and services, including access to education, healthcare, livelihood, and legal services. The government has taken practical steps to advance durable solutions. In this regard, through the Gambia Commission for Refugees, we undertook a study mission to Guinea-Bissau together with UNHCR and relevant national stakeholders to identify workable pathway for local integration and other durable solutions. At the national level, refugees continue to access basic social services, including education and healthcare, through national public service system in accordance with existing policies, procedures, and administrative arrangements. Access to legal service is supported through the National Agency for Legal Aid, contributing to protection, inclusion, and access to justice. The fourth pledge, which runs through the end of 2026.
If you could kindly conclude.
Focusing on setting protection sensitivity response to need of asylum seekers, refugees, stateless persons, and migration movement by sea. This includes improvement, screening, and referral mechanism for persons with specific protection, as well as ensuring the justice for those subject to abuse, exploitation, and trafficking. Excellencies, the Gambia remains firmly committed to the Global Compact on Refugees. We will continue to support those who seek safety on our territory, prevent statelessness, and promote inclusion as pathway to dignity and resilience. With sustained and predictable partnership, we can transform the pledge we made into a lasting solution for the people who depend on them. To fully deliver on this pledge, the Gambia calls for sustained partnership and targeted support, delivering on nationality reform and the prevention of stateless requirements, predictable technical and financial assistance to strengthen legal framework, civil registration and data system. I thank you all.
Thank you, Gambia. We will conclude this session with a presentation from Lesotho.
Chairperson, the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Excellency, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, allow me at the outset to convey on behalf of the government of the Kingdom of Lesotho our warm wish of good health and appreciation to the outgoing United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, Mr. Filippo Grandi. Your dedication, leadership, and heartless service over the years have positively impacted the lives of millions of displaced persons worldwide. We thank you sincerely for your contribution. Chairperson, we gather at a time when the world continues to witness unprecedented level of forced displacement. The number of refugees and asylum seekers, men, women, and children seeking safety, protection, and dignity has reached historic level. This reality serves as continued reminder that global challenges require global response, grounded in compassion, international law, and the other moral obligation to protect those who have lost everything. Allow me to present an update on the progress made by the Kingdom of Lesotho in implementing the 4 pledges announced at the 2019 and 2023 Global Refugee Forum, together with other key national developments. Pledge 1, adoption of a bill granting nationality to children of unknown origin. The government of Lesotho has started the process of developing the Immigration and Citizenship Bill, which among other provisions seek to ensure that children of unknown parentage found within our territory are granted nationality, and that any child born in Lesotho who would otherwise be stateless is entitled to citizenship. The bill has undergone internal consultation and is in advancing through the necessary legislative processes. Pledge 2, facilitation of the sublease of 3 hectares of land for refugee and asylum seekers. Lesotho pledged to facilitate access to land for agriculture and livelihood activity as a means of supporting refugee self-reliance. The process for subleasing this land is at an advanced stage. These measures directly support the reduction of dependency on the government food parcels and stipends, promoting greater autonomy, dignity, and economic resilience among refugees. We invite international partners, donor states, and the private sector to collaborate with us in realizing the full potential of this project through technical expertise, financial support, and innovative partnership. Pledge 3, facilitating the enrollment of refugee children in higher learning institutions. Lesotho undertook to ensure access to higher education, vocational training, and skill development for refugees youth to improve their competitiveness in the labor market. Refugee children living in Lesotho have been successfully enrolled in our secondary and tertiary institutions in the area of agriculture, mechanicals, and small businesses development. This commitment has enhanced their prospects for self-employment and integration into productive sector. Pledge 4, conducting the study on statelessness in Lesotho. A qualitative assessment framework has been developed to identify the person or committees potentially at risk of statelessness. Consultation with the stakeholder, including the border committees, local authorities, and civil society, has been carried out to gather relevant information. Once finalized, these studies will provide critical insight to help guide legislative reforms, policy measures, and targeted intervention to prevent and reduce statelessness. Chairperson, in recognition of the growing demand of the refugee protection, the government is in the process of restructuring the refugee unit within the Department of Home Affairs. This process includes an expansion of personnel, the introduction of specialized roles for protection and case management, and a robust capacity building program delivered in collaboration with international partners. Lesotho acknowledged that refugee protection cannot be achieved by a single institution. Our multi-sectoral committee, comprising government ministry, security agency, UNHCR, civil society organizations, and the local authorities, plays pivotal role in ensuring condition and coherence across all sectors. This committee has been instrumental in strengthening access to essential services, improving border monitoring and humanitarian referral pathway, and incorporating refugee protection into national development strategies. Chairperson, given our geographic proximity and deep social and economic ties, the Lesotho plays a great role in our cooperation with the Republic of South Africa through the Cross-Border Crime Prevention Forum. Our two countries have in joint operation, information sharing, and border management system. This effort has helped preventing human trafficking, migrant smuggling, and exploitation of vulnerable people, including refugees and asylum seekers. The two countries are currently working on the development of the new Pan-African migration model to address cross-border movement, labor migration, and socio-economic integration. Excellency, as a small, mountainous, and resource-constrained nation, Lesotho is acutely aware of the challenges that comes with hosting and supporting displaced population. We remain committed to playing our part and to working with partners to build a future in which every displaced person can access protection, rebuild their life, and contribute meaningfully to society. I thank you.
Excellencies, distinguished delegates, ladies and gentlemen, I would now like to suggest that we break for lunch, and I'll therefore suspend the discussion in plenary until we reconvene at 15 hours. Please note that the next 5 speakers on my list, which include North Macedonia, Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Societies, Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, UNDP, will follow in that order. But I would like to advise that we use this time to collapse further our statements in order to accommodate more speakers, because the list is still quite long. Please note also that those who have not yet had an opportunity to speak are requested to keep their nameplates raised as we continue the plenary this afternoon. These statements will be made from 4:30, but we are required back for the plenary at 15 hours. I will now give the floor to the Secretary for an announcement about the lunchtime events and what will follow thereafter.
Thank you, Chairperson. Excellencies, distinguished delegates, during the lunch break, there are a number of events taking place, including a speaker's corner focused on lived experience from 1 p.m. to 1:30 p.m., 3 side events from 1:30 p.m. until 3 p.m., covering the themes of resettlement in room E and F, gender equality and gender-based violence in room 6 and 7, and innovative financing in room 4. As the chairperson has said, we will reconvene at 3 p.m. with a spotlight session on scaling refugee employment, policy partnership, and labor mobility. After this spotlight session, we will continue with pledge announcements, followed by the discussion in plenary. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Kia, and our session has been adjourned. I thank you.